This is Wicken in Northamptonshire, which may look to you or me like a typical English village. Over here you've got the posh manor house, you've got the church next to it. But 800 years ago, there were two churches and two manor houses, in fact two villages, separated by this little stream. Right here where we are now was Wick Deeve, and over here to the south was Wick Hammon. Naturally, the current residents of Wicken are keen to find out why there were two villages here in the Middle Ages, and they also want to know what happened to the church and the other bits and pieces of Wick Hammon that have long since gone. They also want to know which was here first. But understandably, they're very keen to establish who's got the oldest bit of the village in their back garden. Time Team have been invited here to investigate the origins of two English villages. And as usual, we've got just 3 days to dig up the answers. Oozing with history, the village of Wicken is situated about 5 miles away from the very modern town of Milton Keynes. But we're not the only ones invited to investigate the two medieval villages that once existed here. So the hunt's on to see which village has the earliest origins. And our target area here in Wick Deeve is potentially really exciting. Test pits dug in this field have turned up Saxon pottery dating way back to the 9th century. Meanwhile, our second site in Wick Hammon couldn't be more different. Here we're searching for a medieval church, thought to be in this field somewhere, but we're hoping to find out if the church was built on an earlier religious site. So Helen's team are going to be working in Wick Deeve, where Stuart has been mapping the lumps and bumps. He reckons most of the bigger earthworks are likely to be 15th century and to do with the manor house. But can he see any trace of anything that could be earlier?
What is interesting about the earthworks, if you filter off all the obvious stuff, there is kind of a background noise of subtle earthworks.
Show me a subtle earthwork.
Right. Mission impossible, that, isn't it?
This is a game I've played with Stuart before.
The ground rises up very slightly.
Is it just here?
That's it, yeah, it's just right.
Slight earthworks are very difficult to see, but as usual, he's got ideas on where we should dig.
My feeling is, if we're looking for background noise that's pre-manor, then we ought to be looking in this corner.
But this is the same area that you've got the early pottery down in this corner, isn't it?
It does seem that all the evidence is coming together and
pointing in this corner. I reckon we want an area down in that corner, don't we?
So our first trench in search of the origins of Wick Deeve is going in over one of Stuart's subtle earthworks, and in an area that's also turned up Saxon pottery. Over at Wick Hammon, Sam wants to get on with finding the village's missing church, a building that was pulled down in the 17th century. Stuart, who's much in demand this morning, has found an old map he thinks will help.
1717 it's dated. There's the villagers there, and you can see there's a little parcel in there, which is quite difficult to read at that scale. But if you blow it up, look what it says, the old churchyard, which I think might be a bit of a clue.
Yeah, might be, yeah.
And it also shows a building just there, which I'm confident is that barn behind us.
Oh yes, that looks appropriate.
So this map doesn't show the church at all, but it does give us the area of the churchyard, which is actually over there under where that crop is.
So it's in here somewhere, but where exactly? John's talking to the farmer, who reckons he can narrow down the search.
This is a very light field, particularly this end of the field. Yeah. But there's a patch, you can see a ridge just across here where the crop is tall, a little bit higher. And when we work the field, there is masses of stone there. Big stone like that.
OK, well, I'll arrange for the machine to come in and we'll take as small an area as possible.
Yes, that's accepted. That's what we've agreed.
So the business of clearing the crop gets underway in Wick Hammon. Basically, all we need to do is flatten the wheat so that Geophys can get in to do their survey. Over at Wick Deeve, we're opening up a second trench and turning up a lot of 13th century pottery.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly, there were people living here in medieval times.
Here you go.
I think that looks a bit better.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
There's some big old pieces.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And where's this coming from?
Pottersbury, just up the road. It's called Pottersbury because it was full of potters. There's been, in the medieval times, there's been about 20 kilns excavated there, and it's only a little village, but it's stuffed full of pottery kilns.
Back at Wick Hammon, Geophys are ready to reveal the first ever picture of this village's long-lost church.
I mean, it's not a clear footprint of a church.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, there's
definitely a building here.
And it looks to me as if there's lots of rubble over there.
Yes.
Well, it looks to me as if you might have the sort of chancel coming out here and the rest of it back there. So, yeah, if you can drop us on that.
The earliest documentary reference for this church is in 1218, but we've no clue to when it was actually built. Hopefully this trench will tell us that, and most importantly, if it was built on the site of an earlier Saxon church. Mick's keen to widen our search for Saxon material in the village, and he's gone off to see if he can get permission to dig test pits in a few back gardens.
Right, it must be this one.
I better ask the boss.
Go on then.
Can you show us your garden and we can have a look at it?
Thanks.
You know the idea, we just dig a 1 by 1 metre pit to see what sort of pottery and stuff you've got, and you know, that'll tell us a lot about the way the village has developed. I mean, do you mind us disturbing your grass?
We'll be as careful as we can.
That's okay. Anything, anywhere.
Because I mean, if you take
This family have already collected a few finds and stored them near the stream that was once the boundary between the two villages.
the stream's virtually dried up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in the winter, that'll actually flow over that pipe for about 6 or 7 inches.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is our stream, isn't it, Mick? that's
Yeah,
on
but
the-
you can't believe it. It's all dried up right the way through, you know.
Yeah.
These are them.
These are the stones.
Oh,
and
yes,
that.
right.
The pottery is on, unfortunately over small bits of
But I mean, that looks like building stone.
Yeah, it's good.
So that, yeah, so that's very good news. That suggests you might have had a building or a house on the site originally.
Yeah.
So-
Well, that was
so-
under. There used to be a garage there, and
Yeah.
that was under the base. My
Yeah.
wife dug all that out by hand.
Meanwhile, over here in Wickhammon, I'm trying to get permission for more test pits, and the garden of this house seems to be perfect. Oh, nice house.
What a beautiful pool, Tony.
Oh.
Look at that. You're lucky in this weather.
Wow. It goes on for miles.
It just keeps on going, even in that direction.
On and on and on. Well, I think we're going to need to consult about where best to put it. But you wouldn't mind, provided we don't do it over there, that we put something in. It would only be a little.
Yeah, that's fine. Anywhere.
This garden is especially interesting because it's got a curved boundary round it, and it's just next to our church site in Wickhammon. We're approaching the end of the day now, but I'm keen to see how we're getting on unearthing a church that was last seen way back in 1619. Raksha, you've got something.
Yeah, we're starting to see something eventually. We have these rather substantial stones here, and then if you look at these two, they're faced off, so
Could that be the outside wall of the church?
Part of it, certainly. Not all of it, but part of it.
What do you mean part of it?
It's wider than that.
Beginning of day 2 here at Wicken in Northamptonshire, where we're looking for the origins of the village. Actually, it's a bit more complicated than that, because in the Middle Ages it was split into 2 villages. You had Wickdeeve here, where we are now, and then a little stream, and then Wickhammon over here. So far here in Wickdeeve, we've had some Anglo-Saxon pottery out of that field and some mysterious earthworks, but as yet no structures, so we're going to keep on digging here. But the most exciting part of the day for me is that we're adopting a test pit strategy, which means we're going to dig lots of little holes all over the village. And in order to do that, we've recruited an army of volunteers who Mick and Richard are now briefing. We're putting in test pits in both Wickdeeve and Wickhammon.
Don't assume, because it doesn't look interesting, that it isn't. You know, if any doubts at all, keep it.
The worry is that they might not recognise Saxon pottery.
It basically looks like dog biscuits, but terribly important, you know.
The test pits will only be 1 metre square, but they'll help to build up a picture of where people were living in medieval and Saxon times. Our test pits are going in on gardens coloured green on this map. But I'm wondering if we really need any more, because all these red dots record test pits already dug by Cardiff University.
But I mean, you always do need more, because the finer the number that you've got, the more you can see the variations in different parts of the village.
This is the area that I found so frustrating last night.
Why did you find that frustrating?
Well, because we've got loads and loads of finds from it and absolutely no Anglo-Saxon structures.
If you'd have stayed around a bit longer and not skived off as you did, you would have actually been aware that we actually found post holes last night.
Really?
In that trench, there are post holes.
Dense. So if we can bottom out the footings, maybe we'll find phasing there.
One of Raksha's main jobs now would be to dig down alongside the outer wall to see if it's been built on the foundations of an earlier church. Meanwhile, over at Wickdeave, Matt's got some good news about one of our new trenches.
We've got a ditch. You can see the edge of it coming along here. We've just got to the bottom of it here. It's about 20 centimetres deep. So we've got one side there. Unfortunately, the other side is just beyond the section here, so I think I'll have to extend it a little bit just to get the full width of it.
Even better, we've got some pottery to date it.
Isn't that fantastic?
It's 10th century. It's exactly what we're looking for. It's near to where it's the classic late Saxon pottery in this part of the world.
But it's early days yet. We don't know if it is a ditch until we extend the trench to find the other edge of it. But we do have our first really good evidence of people living around here in Saxon times. Which way around does this go?
The rim's in turn, so it's kind of like that.
And how deep is it?
Maybe 3 inches at the most.
Oh, quite small.
Yeah.
And how wide?
In a bit. Yeah, about that probably.
So sort of shepherd's pie size?
Oh yeah, they're quite small. You do sometimes get them with sockets in the side that you could put wooden handles in and use them as frying pans.
Helen! What are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be over at Wickdeave. But it's Raksha's end of the trench that's got everybody excited. Why, what we got, Raksha?
Well, I decided to extend the trench because we wanted to see whether we could find any earlier phases of the wall. And as we were going down, we seemed to have found a burial.
A burial?
Yeah. You can see this soft material here, which is the fill of the grave, and this is quite hard, and you can see the cut just going all the way around. We found some ribs popping up here. There's a bit of a clavicle, which is this bone just here. But the really interesting thing about it is that it's north-south aligned.
And it's underneath that wall there?
Yeah, it's underneath the wall.
So it's earlier than the wall. When do we think the wall is?
Well, we think that this church complex is about 13th century.
So what's the big deal about it being north-south?
Well, most medieval burials are supposed to be west-east. You have your head to the west and your body to the east. And that's true for the vast majority of the medieval period. But the further you go back into the Anglo-Saxon period, life is not so simple. They haven't quite made a decision about exactly how they should be burying each other. And sometimes you do get these anomalous, weird burials. And I think this might be one of them.
So the discovery of a burial actually under a wall is more than we could have hoped for. It should help to date the construction of the wall. And better still, it could be proof that we found evidence of a Saxon settlement here in Wickhammon as well. But typically, just as I start to get excited, I'm given the bad news from Wickdeave.
What we thought was a ditch actually looks more like a pit now.
Not only has our ditch turned out to be a pit, but Matt's discovered medieval pottery in it, suggesting it was dug in the 12th century rather than in Saxon times. Where's these post holes you were so pleased with then? Phil's got news too. He's finished digging his post holes, and they too are part of the medieval history of Wickdeave.
And this is actually a wall. Now, if you follow up through here, you can project it right the way through here, and when you get to here, it forms a right angle with these big earthworks of the manorial complex.
These are walls likely to have been put in by the manor and connected with the later use of this field. All the evidence suggests that in the 13th century, this field contained numerous wooden houses fronting onto the road close to the manor house and church. Then it appears these houses were all cleared away when the Lord of Wickdeave extended the grounds around the manor sometime in the 15th century. As well as adding to the picture of medieval Wickdeave, we also want to work out the layout of medieval Wickhammon. We've already managed to locate the exact position of the church, and we're learning all sorts of details about what it looked like.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Isn't that an amazing decoration? That is fabulous. You can imagine there must have been 4 of them there, curving around in a circle. It's quite fancy, no matter where it is, isn't it? I mean, we haven't found anything else like that in the trench. No, we haven't. That's amazing.
So you've actually got some pigeonholes on the left-hand side there.
We've got the remnants of 2 rows of pigeonholes with the little ledges where the birds could land.
Yeah.
Mick, that's really substantial,
It is fantastic, isn't it?
So what does that tell us?
Well, presumably we're near a manorial complex or something like that?
I think we're in the manorial farm.
Right.
Lords have a monopoly on the keeping of doves and the brewing of ale. Yeah. So we're very much close to the Lord here, I think.
But do you think this is the manorial complex itself? Because I mean, I've been looking at the layout of the village and the boundaries around it. The dovecot is over here and the church is over here. They seem quite a long way apart for this to be within the manorial enclosure.
After analysing all the maps, Stuart reckons this curving boundary is a clue that the manor house was situated here. This would make sense, as it would put the manor house and the church close together as they are in Wick Deeve. It's possible that the dovecot and the brew house were kept separate as a kind of little industrial unit. This is the first time anyone's ever been able to picture the two manors of Wick Hammon and Wick Deeve together. With the day almost over, there's just time to water the trenches and the archaeologists, while Mick and I check the progress in our test pits. How you getting on with the test pits, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. I've been round them all now, and most of them are producing medieval pottery.
It's all pretty much Pottersbury ware, sort of 1250, 1300 onwards. There's a few bits of earlier stuff, maybe 12th century, but nothing before that. They're all ongoing. I mean, you know, some are deeper than others. Some are only about 20 centimetres deep, some are about 40 centimetres deep.
I think you should knock off now. It's late, it's hot. We'll do the rest tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, as they go deeper, they'll turn up some Saxon evidence. Helen's worry is that we might not have discovered an in situ burial under the wall of the church. So far, we've found no trace of a skull, and they could just be random bones. Digging graves is a slow process, but with less than a day to go, hopefully we'll get an answer soon. But there's a lot more to this trench than just old bones. We're discovering all sorts of details about the history of this church.
Wow, look at that. Beautiful, isn't it? I mean, these tiles are really small, and they're actually smaller than some of those decorated tiles that we've had, which suggests an earlier phase of flora. They are very small. I've seen them this small in a sort of church environment. They're tiny.
But it's not just in the trenches that we're uncovering the forgotten history of Wicken. Stuart's been making some important discoveries of his own about the village green and the large garden belonging to the rectory. I sometimes get the feeling at the beginning of day 3 that we've been summoned by Stuart.
To be told what's going on.
Stuart spotted on an old map that these two areas were both covered in houses that have been cleared away since the map was drawn in 1717.
And what they've done is just cleared all those properties away to create a large garden, and they're diverting the stream to put ponds in there. It's a piece of ornamental landscape into their garden.
It's just like when they used to build the stately homes.
That's right, get rid of the peasants.
Well, it's a mini one, isn't it? It's a mini park, really.
That's right.
Is what they're doing, yeah.
Well, the biggest surprise, though, is that Stuart reckons this stream wasn't the boundary between the two villages in medieval times.
In fact, the layout of the village is actually quite regular over here, and I think the road is more likely to be part of the structure and division between the two villages.
You've caught us at the most exciting moment. We think we found at least part of a skull in the grave cut.
And the other thing that's really exciting is we've just extended the trench. Out of the machining came a piece of pottery.
Paul has dated that to Maxiware 650 to 750.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's the early stuff we've got then.
I know it is beginning to raise the possibility that there is activity including burials on this site right from the Middle Saxon period.
Point of clarification, are you the same archaeologist who was so miserable round the bonnet of the man earlier on?
Fantastic. We have got an in situ burial, and it could be 1300 years old, although it has been disturbed by later building on this site.
We've got this grave cut here. The skull would have been just under the wall here, but as you can see, because they were building the wall, they've messed around with it, and the skull has actually travelled down here. None of the bones are articulated. They're just a jumbled mess. And here we have some of the teeth.
That's hardly worn at all. That's
No.
like a juvenile or a young adult,
Yeah.
isn't it?
This bit comes from a pot that would have looked something like this, and surely it's an encouraging sign that there was something going on here in Saxon times. We've only got a few hours left to find out, so it's just as well that we're starting to make sense of the medieval church. We wanted to find the junction between the nave, where the congregation stood, and the chancel, where the altar was, and it looks like we've found it.
Usually the tower's added later in the sequence, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So by the time we put the tower on, I think that would have side aisles.
And this is how we think it looked before it was pulled down in the 17th century. Although the focus is now very much on the church here in Wick Hammon, there's still the job of sorting out all the information gleaned from our various test pits. Essentially, what we've been doing is adding lots of new information to the archaeological map. such as the lost road and buildings discovered here in the rectory gardens.
Well, nearly everything from this test pit's medieval. It's the Pottersbury again, mid-13th to 14th.
We didn't find any trace of Saxon history in these back gardens, but the medieval pottery finds add to the picture of how the village of Wicken expanded around 1200 AD.
Yeah, I mean, it all seems to be from the pottery the same date along this entire block. I mean, I can't imagine that these things just sprung up simultaneously by accident, certainly.
Right.
So.
Strikes me that we might have a bit of village planning going on here in Wicken.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
See this? That is 10 Roman coins. If I found these all together in the ground, they'd officially constitute an archaeological hoard. So imagine finding this many coins. 55,000 to be precise. This is the single largest site we've ever attempted to investigate. And as usual, in Trestiebus nobis cognoscendum est. It's a fantastic notion, this idea that underneath this field is an entire Roman town. But when I look at it, all I can see is the sweep of the stubble. I can't see any lumps and bumps or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much, does it really, Tony? But actually, this is the site of a Roman town called Cunetio. But its site was lost for almost 2,000 years until aerial photographs in the 1940s showed unmistakable parch marks. Ditches, big stone wall, Roman buildings, Roman street.
So Trench 1 is going in across a break in the southern wall, where the team suspects we might find the gateway and a watchtower.
There's our first Roman find. I'd say that's a piece of Roman pot.
Yeah, without doubt, that's from Dorset. So yeah, that's probably going to be later Roman.
I didn't want an address for it.
Despite centuries of destructive ploughing on this field, geophys are producing cracking results, and that's reflected in the archaeology. Phil, how are we getting on?
Superbly, Tony. Just as on the geophysics, we've got the wall here, it ends about here, and then I think we're going into the ditch. It's much darker through there, and it gets chalky around there, and at the back, round the corner, we've got this big black blob with pottery, and we've got bone on it. I think that's our pit. And apart from that, we've got other bits of pottery, we've got coins. It really is all coming together.
So already it looks as though our Roman town is beginning to appear in the field. How much more is there? We'll find out later. Oh, and of course, this being Time Team, it looks like it's going to bucket down any minute. John, what is that contraption?
This is Jimmy in the future. We've got such a big site here. The only way we decided we could tackle it was to try this new bit of kit that the Swedish have developed. And basically, it's radar on wheels.
Jimmy, is this usually used on archaeological sites?
No, this has been designed with utility mapping in mind, so looking for pipes and cables. Hasn't actually been used on archaeology in Britain before.
Well, that's quite exciting.
It really is a first, and it is absolutely amazing.
And as the predicted rain starts to fall, Trench 1 gives us our first classy find.
Ah, yeah. It's a spoon. Yeah, that's the handle. You've got the little drop, and then you've got just part of the bowl. Would have been a circular one, and they tend to be earlier rather than late Romans. They're more likely 2nd century, early 3rd.
These types of spoon were usually silvered or tin-plated, and were a cut above the regular day-to-day wooden variety. And equally lavish objects were unearthed here during the 50s and 60s. Unfortunately, the excavation notes were never published, but the amazing finds did make it to a local museum.
David, one of the problems we've got on this site is a small amount of digging that has taken place as they've been written up, but you've got all the finds in the museum.
That's right, and you see them all here. Here is a piece of stone from an arch. It would have sat like that as a column, and the arch for the gateway would have sprung from there. Just shows how monumental the building was. And then, back here, we have some painted wall plaster, and you can see the decoration, the designs on here.
So, do we know where that's from?
I know it's from Trench BB, and I'm not quite sure where that's from. So that's something, hopefully, you will be able to find out.
So it does suggest that there's a building of high status, presumably with plaster, maybe with a hypercourse, that kind of thing?
Could be.
Back out on site, we've now identified a second target.
We're in the middle of the walled town, and there's this massive building which we think is a mansio.
Oh, that's one of those hotel-type things that high-status people used to stay in when they were wandering around the country.
That's right. Yeah. It's a building made up with a series of rooms, and it's ideal for radar to work on. So we thought this is the best target for us to try. If we look at Mike's computer, we can actually see the results on screen already. I mean, you've seen these time slices before. We've put all the results together, and what we can see are several rooms here, and we think this is part of the mansio. So the plan is to put a trench across one of the walls from inside the room into the courtyard, see if we can get some dating evidence and see the state of preservation.
So our investigation expands from Trench 1, looking for the southern gateway, to Trench 2, which takes in this substantial building in the interior. And the radar results are good, as we're straight down onto the archaeology.
Your work here is done, I think, Ian.
But with Trench 2 looking to ID this building, I'm concerned that we're overly confident it's a mansio.
Well, in the aerial photographs, there is a very clear, large building which has lots of rooms within it arranged around a courtyard. And these you very often find in towns. And so this looks like a mansio. It's in the right kind of place for a mansio. Therefore, it's highly likely to be one.
What do you mean it's in the right place? Do you mean that it's slap bang in the middle of the town inside the walls?
Well, you actually have to imagine that the walls aren't there. Because if they're sort of 4th century, then the mansio was probably built before this. So what I mean is it's right in the centre of where all the roads are coming together, all the major roads are coming together and joining. What you're providing is somewhere for people to eat, somewhere for people to sleep, and somewhere for them to change horses. So you have a whole sequence of bedrooms. Very often, or at least in the earlier stages of them, the bedrooms were of 2 different sizes as to whether you had important officials staying or the common or garden soldier or messenger or postman staying.
If what we have got is a mansio, what does that tell us about this site?
It tells us that it did have a formal function within the Roman imperial system.
If they're right, then Cunetio was built around a Roman travel lodge, with important visitors coming and going on a daily basis.
Is that all coins you got there?
Yep, I've got 13 here.
Where have they come from?
They've come from the spoil heaps just round this trench.
But they've all just come from this trench?
Yep.
I mean, have you got any dates for them?
Well, there's one here that dates to about 270, and that's a coin of Gallienus. But the rest of them really tightly date to the middle of the 4th century, so around 320 to 340 AD.
I mean, I suppose, it's a lovely little collection, but the sheer fact that it's all from the spoil tip, it's all unstratified, it actually only tells us that the Romans were here in Cunetio at that time.
That's true, but the interesting thing here is that 20-year period that the coins come from. And I'm wondering whether perhaps at some point a plough has hit a little coin hoard, perhaps?
Another one?
Yeah, another coin hoard from Cunetio.
See, when you say that, I was thinking this morning, Tony said he had a handful of 10 coins, and he said that constitutes a hoard. You got 13.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is another case of potential treasure.
Wow.
But the weather has caused one major setback. Rain has seeped into the radar machine's computer, forcing it to retreat from sight. Geophys have lost their ultimate weapon. Man will have to triumph where machine has failed. Under the marquee, though, work goes on unhindered. Matt, can I come in your trench?
Yeah, quick, get under the tent.
It's getting worse and worse out there.
It's miserable, isn't it?
I think you're in the best place. This is where we thought there might be a mansio, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we've got it. Over here we've got this lovely packed chalk surface. In the middle, we're just starting to get the stones of this wall coming up, and that goes straight down this way behind me there. On that side, we've got this courtyard area, or yard surface, looks like, and on top of it, in front of Christo there, can you see stone roof tiles? Slid straight off the roof and landed right there.
So we know we've got a building.
Yeah.
We know it's Roman.
Yeah.
But we don't know it's a mansio, do we?
True, but this fits in perfectly with the geophysics, so I'm pretty sure that we've got it.
So you're happy to continue?
Oh yeah, I'm well up for it.
I'm not surprised. You're the only dry people on the site.
We've clearly got a massive building here, and the problem is there's just so much going on. Unpicking it is just so difficult.
But unpick it we must, so we put another trench in on the strongest anomalies in the building. A mansio would likely have had both a bathhouse and heated rooms. So if we can find them, then we've as good as got our ID. Back over in Trench 1, Phil's confident he's finally found the gateway.
What I've got here is the butt end of the wall that John got on his geophysics. You can see here these flints set into the mortar, where the flints that way are just in loose soil.
The geophys team, still without their speedy radar on wheels, are putting in the miles and getting the acres done.
That should line up with those defences.
And their survey is gradually adding key features to the rich tapestry of our 3D map. But 20 metres away, on the other side of the Roman courtyard, Matt has at last pinned a date to the Mancio.
You know, Matt, the thing about this trench was it had a great plan, didn't it? And it absolutely matched the geophysics like a dream. But we didn't actually have any dating for any of it. But looks like it's changed.
Yeah, indeed. We've just done this tiny little hole up against the wall here. Must be about half a metre by about 30 centimetres. We've got pottery from the floor itself, this chalk floor that I'm kneeling on. We've got pottery from the kind of layer below the chalk floor, and there's another layer below that, and there's pottery coming out of that as well, so there's plenty to choose from.
Well, just a quick inspection, the immediate thing is it's not late Roman. You know, Samian ware is always classically sort of 1st and 2nd century AD. That looks like to be 2nd century. So it does suggest that these floors are being laid around about the 2nd century AD, but there's absolutely no late Roman pottery at all, and nor is there any sort of later floor levels. But it sort of suggests, doesn't it, that this building was built around the 2nd century AD, but perhaps by the time that the stone walls were going up and the fancy house in the far corner was being built, this could be out of use.
Yeah, pretty sure it was.
So before huge walls dominated Canetio, the heart of the town was a mancio with its many bedrooms, stables and bustling kitchen, providing an important staging post on the imperial highway to the west. It was somewhere on the road heading south from that mancio that the massive coin hoard was buried, and Matt seems to be a step closer to finding its location.
Philippa, this has just come out
Wow.
of the ground down there. It was just in the subsoil, kind of churned up, kind of leaning up against the structure here.
Well, it's the earliest coin that we found in the past 3 days, definitely.
Oh.
It's an ass, and it's the Emperor Nero.
So what date is that?
That's 64 to 68 AD.
It's pretty precise. So what we've got here is this oval coming round like that, set into this chalk structure. You can see the chalk blocks coming around there, and it looks to kind of be coming to a point round there.
I must admit, looking at the shape, the way it's emerging, Neil, oven is what springs to mind.
You've got potentially then a sort of oven set inside a building, domestic occupation, and probably earlier rather than later.
I would have thought so, Neil, up here, yeah. So we're in someone's kitchen.
As Phil heads underground, my questions are on the money. Do you reckon these were buried in panic?
It's a possibility, and that's the traditional interpretation of Roman coin hoards, that they were buried in a time of unrest and then the people would come back and collect them when things had calmed down.
Do you believe that?
Well, it's a possibility, but I think there are lots of other reasons why coin hoards might have been buried.
Like what? Who might have access to this kind of money?
Well, I don't think it's going to be one individual, but money lenders maybe would get this sort of number of coins. Or we could look at this as being a sort of community collection, and that it's been buried for a religious reason and that they've come together to give this all to the gods.
Well, we reckon that's about it.
So, it's not very deep, is it? The room's practically at the surface.
But you've got to remember, the original Cunetio hoard was roofed over with a slab, and that slab probably was at ground level. So this is probably what it looked like.
What are you excavating right there now?
Well, we've got these layers of demolition that come off either side, so the idea is to put a slot down through these, thinking that, you know, there was a chance that they were going to be covering intact floors. But unfortunately, it looks like this is actually build-up, and the floors would have been higher, so we've lost them.
So it's certainly a very high-status building, but we're not going to be able to tell just from this one trench.
No, unfortunately not.
The dating evidence for this substantial building points to activity in the 3rd and 4th centuries, the same date as the stone walls, so it's likely to have played an administrative role over the late town. We've had some really fascinating archaeology from all over the site. We've got the Mancio, we've got the big high status building that Stuart identified, we've got the building where the hoard originally came from, but we keep being drawn back to this trench for one very good reason. This wall. It's huge, isn't it, Mark? It's monumental.
We knew it was big, but to actually now see it exposed is incredible. I mean, you've got the front face there.
Just here?
Yeah. The rear face is here, and then we've got another big foundation beyond that, probably for a gatehouse. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing.
But when this gatehouse was at its apogee,
yeah,
what would it have looked like?
Well, let's go and stand up where we would have been in the middle of the gate. So we're roughly now standing in the middle of the road. You've got a gate that's at least 5 to 6 metres wide. Then you're going to have a great single arch coming up 4 to 5 metres high. The wall itself's going to be 6 to 8 metres high. We've got the block behind us telling us there's a kind of tower structure, so there's probably another storey above that. It's very impressive.
When you first pick one of these things up, it seems pretty light, but the more you hold it, the more you can feel its weight in your biceps and, for me, in the small of my back. And yet you guys have been going up and down this field non-stop for 3 days.
Yeah, well, you've just walked about 20 metres.
Yeah.
If you kept going for another 55 kilometres in total, you'd have walked what the team have walked in the past 3 days. I mean, they've collected just short of 500,000 data points and surveyed 27 acres of ground. I mean, it's the biggest survey we've ever done on Time Team.
And the result has been an entire Roman town. Is there anything about it that surprised you or you didn't expect?
There's just so much going on, it's unbelievable. You know, there's the enclosure ditches, the defences, the trackways, the fields, the paddocks, the buildings, a complete plan. And it's coming right through the field, and we've not actually found a limit to the archaeology.
It's quite brilliant. You've actually got 400 years of history on one piece of paper. So our findings suggest that Cunetio began in the 1st century as the Roman army drove a road west. A small settlement grew around a major crossroads, and early in the 2nd century, a mancio developed to cater to passing travellers. Attempts to formalise the town resulted in a gridded street plan. But all that was done away with in the 4th century when town planners slapped down huge walls and cleared the interior, administering the town from the big villa in the corner. All a far cry from the field today. Phil, why do you reckon Cunetio eventually disappeared under the ground, whereas other Roman towns like Cirencester survived?
Well, the way I see it, Tony, probably in the early Romano-British period, you had a perfectly peaceable, prosperous little community thriving here. Everybody going about their local business, minding their own business and getting on perfectly well. And then in the later Roman period, you have the might of bureaucratic, administrative Rome coming here and building this whacking great wall, bringing in their taxation, their administration and all those nasty things. And I reckon that killed the local community. They cluttered off. And then, of course, when the Romans went away, well, the locals didn't want to come back, did they?
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
Codnor Castle sits right on the border between Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, surrounded by countryside which has been parkland for a millennium. Over the last 500 years, the park's been extensively mined, and believe it or not, there are even records of mines within the castle walls. We have this big problem in that no one knows where the mines were or how deep they were. So John and his team have been here since the crack of dawn, trying to do the preliminary work for us. John, what are the chances of survival? And I'm not just talking about the archaeology.
Well, I think you'll survive. The problem is we still can't find any of these shafts.
If there's been mining here for centuries, are we likely to find anything at all?
Yeah, look behind you, Tony. Can you see the stonework between the towers and the grass above it? That's the ground level inside there, so it's above your head. It's a good 6 foot higher than out here. And I guess what that is it's a product of quarrying and mining waste being dumped in there. Now that could act like a protective blanket, sealing and protecting the archaeology underneath. Looks just like building rubble, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
We want to find out when Codnor Castle was built and what it looked like. So Trench 1 goes in on the upper court, inside what's thought to be the oldest part of the castle. And 6 foot below, in the lower court, we're sinking 2 more trenches, just outside the old castle walls.
The north gable end of the chamber block. But it's internal.
Ah.
There's a great big fireplace there.
Yes, and that's enormous, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So if that implies a room coming this way...
It's a high-status room of some description, otherwise it wouldn't have had a fireplace that size, but it's some sort of domestic chamber. You know, not the main chamber, but sort of an annex to it, possibly.
So Geophys set to work to find the room's missing wall. Meanwhile, Raksha's found our first bit of dating evidence near to her wall.
Well, Paul, we've had our first piece
Oh,
of
that's
pottery. It's pretty modern now, isn't it?
No, that's late 17th century, early 18th, something like that.
That's modern in my book.
Not modern.
The jug dates to the period just before we know the castle was in ruins.
With this wall, you can see that face coming along there.
Yeah.
Now it's been chopped out here by quarrying and mining, but we've got a really good face on this side, and where Ratcher is, I think we've got something coming up there, Ratch.
There's these 2 stone lintels, one here and one upright right there. Part of the doorway, which the entrance is to be running in that direction.
So do you reckon that this wall here, Richard, goes with this one here?
Certainly looks like it. It's roughly parallel, and that was obviously some sort of high-status chamber with a properly glazed window over it.
So what kind of room could it be?
Well, it's next to the gateway, so possibly Porter's Lodge.
This is great news. We're not even at the end of day 1, and already we've managed to locate one of the key rooms in Codnor Castle.
The main discovery since we were last here is this wall here, the return coming off this one, which is built into it, so it's a part of the same structure. You can see just in the corner there, it looks like we've got...
Just here.
Yep, coming back this way as well.
And that would fit possibly with there being a drawbridge here, with a drawbridge pit underneath it.
Oh, right.
But the problem is that it doesn't line up with this turret very well. This edge seems to be going underneath the turret. It's hard at the moment to think what else it might be.
Despite Matt's reticence, this is a huge surprise. A drawbridge means a much grander entrance to the castle than we ever imagined.
Oh, that's nice.
And the finds aren't too shabby either.
It's a beautiful little thing, really delicate little cup. You know, just the rim coming around like that. They sometimes have like up to 8 handles on them. They're really peculiar little things.
But as if we weren't busy enough, right at the end of the day, Geophys come up with a new target.
I think we've come up trumps. We've got this fireplace in the end of that building. In the geophysics, you can now actually see this wall line. I think we've actually got a room that goes with that fireplace. I think there's a wall line that comes along here. And then look, this strong response here. Is that another building on that platform there?
Just above the drawbridge trench, inside the round towers of the gateway, Richard has managed to find some dating evidence to help us work out the chronology of the castle.
These tops, these lintels, are quite distinctive. These are called shouldered lintels.
Right.
And this is a kind of cantilevered out block there.
I see.
To hold a flat there.
Right.
And they're also called Carnarvon arches, because they first really come in when Edward I is building the Welsh castles at Carnarvon in the 1280s. And they're used for about 50 years.
So that ties in really nicely with the documentary reference as well, because we've got that first reference in 1308, which is bang in the middle of the period.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. OK, let's go and look for some more.
Interestingly, the building of the gateway corresponds with a period of royal favour for the medieval knights who lived here. Henry III is said to have kissed Richard de Grey in gratitude because he and his brother were the only noblemen to sign up for an unpopular crusade. And in 1294, Edward I paid a royal visit to Codnor, an event so momentous it could even have prompted a rebuild. So the gateway could have replaced the drawbridge that Neil now thinks was surrounded by a tower.
And measuring back 28 centimetres before it starts. So if we go back and measure across...
To prove it, we need to find a similar chamfered edge on the other side.
Is it a stone lying at an angle or is it a chamfer?
Is it There it is. That's definitely
there.
It is.
That's got to be it there. You cannot argue with that.
You win.
I buy that.
Gold star for you.
Bang on.
How about that? So I guess what it's showing is, isn't it, that we actually have a symmetrical tower on either side of the drawbridge pit. And I guess it kind of confirms that this is clearly unrelated to that.
Yeah.
So this means there would have been a wooden bridge over the moat. Under attack, the de Greys could have burnt this as a first line of defence. Then there was a drawbridge over the pit, which would have raised on a pivot. And if the intruders got this far, there would probably have been a portcullis. This elaborate defence seems to fit the image of the de Greys, because these were soldiers who featured in every battle from Agincourt against the French back to the Scottish Wars and the Crusades. And we're hoping to find some of their rooms alongside the missing west wall, where Faye's digging.
Brian,
Yeah,
we can have a look at these.
of course. Well, what I think you've got here is part of a plaster wall surface. It's got this nice plain surface on one side, and if you turn it over, you can see the impressions of the wooden laths that the plaster would have been attached to.
If we've got that, what could this feature be? This kind of semicircular feature coming in?
Does that butt up against the wall?
Yep.
Looks very like it might be a circular staircase.
Yes, I was so hoping you were going to say that. That's fantastic.
Over the last 2 days, we've discovered so many bits of walls and windows and finds from different phases of the castle that my head's spinning.
Is that a bit of marble?
Is it marble?
Or quartz?
Yeah. No idea.
I mean, you almost wonder where it might have come from, a statue or something.
Yeah, from the garden, yeah.
This dig has been so rich that it sometimes seems as if the castle has been bursting to tell its story. With such a vast amount of material coming out of the moat, it's important that we search the spoil heap thoroughly. And this is why. Why is your hand shaking?
Gold coin, gold hammered coin.
Look at that hand. Come here, look at that.
I can't hold it still, I'm afraid.
And given how soft gold is and how big this is, that is absolutely quite incredible.
Over the last 3 days, we found more than we bargained for, and Faye's west wall is no different.
OK, so does that kind of line up with the, well, just about, doesn't it?
It's pretty much in line with that lower court wall. But the most impressive bit is this block of masonry which comes all the way around here and is sweeping round like that. So it's actually a round tower that's been stuck on to the curtain wall. And you can see, look at the foundations, they're going down and down and down. It's massive this way, it's massive down that way. Inside our round tower, we've got loads and loads of burning. And originally we thought this was kitchen. But the thing that really made us change our mind was this feature over here, which appears to be a fireplace. You can actually see that it's later because it's got all those bricks in it.
You know, it's 6.5 metres wide and it's 3 metres deep. Coming further back up, we see here now we've got the abutment on the other side of the moat. You know, really well-built mortared wall. And so coming up here, you know, you get a really good perspective of just how impressive that tower is. And goodness knows, what's it standing? 7, 8 foot high? You know, just think none of that was visible yesterday.
So this is how Henry de Grey and Isolde, his wife, would have entered their castle in the 13th century. Across the moat, over a grand drawbridge, past the porter's lodge and into the Great Hall. But in the early 14th century, the castle was rebuilt with towers and turrets on the perimeter walls. In the 15th century, they extended into the lower court. But it was the Zouches in the 16th century whose extravagant plans bankrupted the estate and left the castle a ruin.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.